Are you ready to turn your investments into retirement income? Listen in as Jeremy Keil and his guests reveal ways you can make smarter retirement, investment, and tax planning decisions to achieve your ideal retirement. You will learn more about your money so you can feel better about your money and make better money decisions. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to Retirement Revealed. I'm your host, Jeremy Keil, and we're here to turn your retirement savings into a consistent income. And today we're talking about the Wisconsin retirement system. I'm brought on here Dennis Eisenberg. He's with Eisenberg and Associates. He's a Wisconsin pension consultant, and just saw him about a month or so ago give a presentation. Absolutely loved it. It was perfect timing because my wife has just gotten back into the Wisconsin retirement system, and I'm thinking, hey, I could learn a lot from Dennis here, and let's bring him on to educate all the rest of us.
Thanks, Jeremy. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, Dennis. And just tell me a little bit more about yourself and how you got into being a Wisconsin pension consultant.
Well, long story short, I taught for a couple of years in Illinois and then moved up here to Wisconsin to take a labor relations job. And in the labor relations job, I have a master's degree in business administration. So I was tapped to look at the Wisconsin retirement system and the teacher pensions in general, and to do bargaining related to health care and pension issues in particular. So my background is that I work for the Wisconsin Education Association Councils, generically called WEAC, and for a short time, a similar position as an arbitration and negotiation specialist in Minnesota.
Yeah, that just shows you've got a wealth of experience and a lot of different angles. And I love the Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota connections because you can see the differences between the different pensions and systems out there.
Yeah, they're huge. And as some of your listeners may know, the Illinois retirement system has been for more than 30 years badly underfunded, and the Illinois legislature recently started to do the correction on that, but it's going to take a lot of monies and or reduced benefits in order for the system to get to the point where it's sustainable.
And we are talking here about the Wisconsin retirement system itself, yet half of our listeners are outside of Wisconsin. I want all of them to keep on listening because what we're talking about is going to be specific numbers and things related to Wisconsin retirement, but the concepts, the idea of these are the things that you ought to be considering and looking at and learning about your own pension system, whether it's a public pension or a company pension or even just Social Security or just your retirement planning in general. These are things you ought to be looking at. And yes, we'll be talking Wisconsin retirement numbers, but it's going to be so applicable of these are the concepts, these are the generalities, these are the process you should be looking at when you hit your retirement date.
All right, let's get at some of those questions.
Let's do it. And Wisconsin retirement system, I don't know if you knew this or perhaps you did, but they've got Wisconsin retirement system. They've got a podcast, and I love podcasts. I've been listening to it. It's amazingly important and the most impactful and informative. The latest one I listened to just talked about how large the Wisconsin system is. Can you talk about that? How big is the system? How many people are in it? Just things like that.
Sure. I can just give you a little bit of background. First off, the Wisconsin retirement system is a unique plan. It has, in the vernacular of defined benefit and defined contribution aspects, and actually the final pension amount provides you with a higher of the investment returns over your longevity and or a multiplier based on your years of service and your salary at the end of your career. Roughly, there's about 260,000 public employees in Wisconsin. These include hospital workers and protective occupations, as well as school employees, which is the largest group. There's almost 250,000 annuitants and nearly 170,000 individuals who have worked in the system but are what they called inactive, and therefore they're not drawing the pension, and many are waiting until they vest and are eligible to pull both the employee and employer share benefits out of the system. So it's a It's the ninth largest public pension plan in the U.S. and very, very secure. In addition to that, they've done a great job over the recent time periods, and they think in terms of decades and not weeks or months like some of us sometimes do. They're the 25th largest pension plan in the world, and so they're when they speak, it's good to listen to what they have to say.
Well, that's exactly why I started listening to their podcast. I figure you're managing about $150 billion. You're paying out all these benefits. You're thinking about all the things that our retirement clients are thinking of. You mentioned too, especially in your presentation, I saw so many advantages of something called a defined benefit pension compared to doing it on your own. I'm going to list out a few of them that you had mentioned earlier.
Sure.
And just maybe add some commentary to it.
Okay. Happy to do that.
One benefit is that you can't outlive it. Like you can't outlive your pension. Another benefit is that you're having these pensions manage your money at a far cheaper rate than almost any financial advisor could do it. And potentially you're doing a better job through the pension than if you were managing it on your own.
Yeah.
And there's another piece of it called smoothing. We'll talk about that. So let's go through some of those things.
All right.
The outliving it or can't outlive it, the rates of returns, kind of the
we'll take them in the order you just
Perfect.
Articulated. So for your listeners here, and whether you're in Wisconsin or in New York, it just doesn't matter. The greatest problem that most senior investors have is not outliving their revenue stream or their income. And so today, for example, when you're looking at a very different environment than you had even a year ago, with inflation running at 7 to 8% and unlikely to drop by the end of the year very far, in my opinion, having a secure retirement plan and having a system that has some inflation protection is critical. And the defined benefit plan, such as WRS, that applies to, and I'm just going to use teachers generically here as we go through the podcast. So for teachers who are roughly 70% female, and obviously your audience is half female, if one
Most
statistically.
Likely. Yep.
Longevity is a very, very serious issue, and the Wisconsin retirement system, which manages your money whether or not you have mental capacities in your 70s, 80s, 90s, or 100s, is a blessing in disguise. So if you think about this as an adjunct or an add-on to Social Security, they're both basically defined benefit-like plans and secure in the sense that you're not going to be running out of money because of the way the pension systems are designed.
Yeah, it's such a nice thing. It's amazing when you hit retirement. Everyone used to like the idea of I've got pension, I've got Social Security, I can get some interest off my bank accounts, things like that, some dividends. Well, the interest and dividends don't seem to be there as much anymore. The pensions don't seem to be there as much anymore. And so when you've got access to a pension, especially one like the Wisconsin retirement system, it just shows how valuable it is to get that monthly income coming in, coming out. Speaking of that, when you are part of the system, you get something called an annuity. Maybe could you just define that word annuity for us?
An annuity is it's a stream of income that's provided at a particular point based upon either how much you've put into it in general or an obligation that someone has. So if you win the lottery, you can annuitize that large amount and be paid a cash amount yearly for the rest of your life. And so an annuity is basically a stream of income that provides certainty in terms of cash flow for you.
You got it. And so many people, especially the older you get into retirement, that you like that certainty coming in.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, we've talked a little bit, kind of some general systems, and of course, we're not providing any specific investment advice, but there's a lot of generalities when you study a system as much as you have, and when you're someone who's a retirement-focused financial planner like ourselves, we can pick up on some generalities that are probably leaning you towards the right direction. And one of you mentioned briefly there is that 70% of the retirees in this system, in Wisconsin retirement, are women, and yet the payouts are the same whether you're a male or a female. And that makes sense. It's kind of fair. Like, hey, a male teacher and a female teacher should get the same pension amount, roughly speaking, based on years of service and salary. Like, why would you want to pay one more than another? Except that, on average, women live longer. So guess what's more valuable? The female annuity is going to be more valuable if it's the same dollar amount.
Yes, absolutely. And statistically, you're looking at least a couple more years for female annuitants than male value, at least when they initially retire.
Yeah, you got it. So in general, if you're the female, the thing you can do to maximize that long-term payout, to maximize the value of the annuity is a great thing. So we'll maybe touch about this idea later on, but something called the Social Security Accelerated option, where you can get more money up front and less money later on, especially for the females, that might not be as good of a deal because the more money later on is probably more valuable.
Yes, definitely. This is the pay me now or collect later concept to me. One of the things that the retirement system allows, which I never recommend, by the way, is that unless someone has severe health concerns and has limited longevity horizons, is increasing your pension for, in this case, the Wisconsin retirement system substantially, let's say 30%, for several years until you turn 62. So the example would be a teacher that's 59 takes an accelerated benefit, and yes, you get money as if Social Security were being provided to you, but it's actually through the Wisconsin retirement system. But what you give up is a lower pension for the rest of your life. So once you get to 62, because in many cases you're going to live longer in retirement than you did during your working career, you wind up short-sheeting yourself, using that term, for time periods after that reduces. So the example I used in the seminar that Jeremy went to was having $1,000 a month, having that jacked up for several years to $1,300, but then for the rest of your life you get high 800s or 900s, low 900s going forward. And so a 10% reduction has two factors that hurt. One, obviously, is the lower amount. But because the Wisconsin retirement system is based off of preserving income through inflation adjustments, you also lose those 10% of all the inflation adjustments for the rest of your life. So absent health constrictions, I stay away from those kinds of things in terms of recommendations.
Yeah, a lot of people don't factor that. So many people hit retirement thinking, how can I get much more money next month? And it's our job as financial planners, your job as someone consulting a retiree heading into their pension choices to say, here's how it's going to affect your whole retirement. And one reason, which is so interesting, why this idea of taking the accelerated benefit is likely not a good idea, is that the Wisconsin state legislature plugged into the system a return assumption of 5%. Why does that matter? Because when they're trying to figure out, saying, what's the value of the extra money that they're going to give you for the next couple of years by taking it early, and what's the value of basically what they're taking away from you later on, 10 and 15 and 25 years from now, they're using 5%. And an interesting thing about that is it's a little technical, but they have to discount these future cash flows. They're thinking of a promise to you 25 years from now, and it's supposed to be $1,000 a month or whatever it is. They've got to discount that back at 5%, which means it's kind of a really low number. When in reality, right now, most pensions, the IRS system, they include a 3% rate of return. That's the normal discounting rate. So basically what you're doing when you take your pension early by doing this accelerated amount is you're saying, I've got this sweet deal where my pension is based on a 5% growth and the market rate is 3%, right? You're basically giving up something that's better than it should be. And usually that's not a good choice. You usually want to grab the thing that's worth more, and grabbing money in the future from the Wisconsin retirement pension at 5% is worth more than it should be, and maybe something that should be kind of protected and pushed towards, hey, take the stuff that's later on. It's worth a lot more by doing that.
Right. And another fallacy is that if you take the money sooner, what happens if you, quote, die early? Mm-hmm. Your biggest problem, Mr. and Mrs. Listener, is not whether you're going to die too early. It's not dying too early. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes down to it, you need to be concerned about how when you turn 80 or 85 or 90, how it is you're going to pay for health care, how you're going to pay for rent, what the costs of long-term aging factors are, and other related issues related to longevity. And so it's important that you plan wisely, and that's where a good consultant and planner can be very helpful to you.
Right, absolutely. And there's so many things we can get into, and I wanted to focus on some of the highlights and just encourage people. This is a decision you get to make like once in your lifetime. You fill out the paperwork, you sign it, you send it off. It's set in stone. Like, this is so valuable. I mean, your pension decision is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not even $1 million.
Yeah, it's closer to $1 million for. Even if you look at just Social Security as a comparison, which is less than, the payments are generally less than this pension plan, you're looking at maybe $600,000 or $700,000, taking into consideration an inflation adjustment.
Yeah,
and it gets and so you're talking about the equivalency of having $1 million in your bank and then buying the same annuity, and so it's very, very valuable.
Yeah, definitely. And so far we've learned, especially if you're female, these rates for your pension are set out to where the monthly annuity is worth more than kind of it should be. And also we've learned that the longer you can take that annuity for, by kind of pushing your money out towards the future and not taking this upfront, really adds a lot of value to your situation. Here's something that's interesting too, is that, and let's just talk about the teachers. You can do a lot of stuff with protective services and some of the judges and
firefighters,
and the executives and stuff. So we can get into that personally, but let's just go with the teachers because that's the biggest one out there. When you're a teacher, you can retire at 55. And my wife's in the teacher system. I've got her annual statement of benefits. I think this usually comes out around May. Does that sound about right?
It does. It's annualized in May. That's correct.
Yeah, and so you're probably listening to this in May because I think we're going to try to plan the release of this right around that time. But I'm looking at my wife's. What's funny about this annual statement of benefits is it's a little too long. Like, it's just a little bit longer than a average sheet of paper. And I'm looking, it's great information where it tells you your years of service, your earnings, all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to key in on one thing in particular, the last section, Section 10, Retirement Benefit Projections. And what's so interesting about that is it says, here's your age 55 amount, here's your age 65 amount, and there's not too much of a difference really between 55 and 65 that I'm seeing in there. And so many people look at that and say, well, I'm not waiting until 65 to retire. It doesn't seem worth it. I'm just going to retire at 55 because that's when I can. And what's so interesting is that there's a lot of ages between 55 and 65, and there's one very important age in there of 57. Let's talk about that. And you got some great examples of what is the difference between when you can retire at 55, when you can, versus 57, when often that 2-year wait, there's something magical about 57 inside of the system.
Right. And there's actually 2 actuarial reductions. So if normal retirement age is 65 for this system or for you, and you retire earlier under this Wisconsin retirement system, it's premised on the individual having worked 30 years. And as we all know, women bear most of the responsibility for child-rearing and certainly childbearing, and are often out of the workforce for some time period. And so the probability of them having worked 30 years by age 55 is smaller than it would be for males, for sure. So if they've only worked 25 years in my example here, then the retirement system is going to provide an actuarial discount, meaning you're just going to get less money because you haven't put money in for 30 years. So if they're going to provide you with an annuity, a stream of income from 55 to 95, then there has to have been substantial contributions on your part and the employer's part in order that they have enough money to guarantee they won't run out of money. So so the system says, okay, you can retire early, but generally we're going to be providing about a 5% reduction if you don't have enough years in the service. The second factor is that particularly now that inflation's kicking up, you're likely to have inflation-adjusted salaries, and that's one of the factors in the retirement system's calculation about how much you owe. So if you leave now and 5 years from now, your salary would have been 15% higher, just to be a 3% round. That's going to mean that for the rest of your life, your pension's going to have to be 50% bigger, but because you put more money in for longer, you get the added benefit of those additional years of service. So I generally recommend, again, other than health, reasons that employees work at least until 57, and if they don't have 30 years of service, then they should be working longer. And if you're female, because of the longevity issue, I would work longer than my counterpart males.
Yeah, it just gives you a higher amount, and that higher amount is going to be more impactful. They're kind of playing a bit of a catch-up, but even then, that exact dollar amount that a female is getting compared to what a male is getting it's more valuable to the female because of the average longevity. Or hey, for the guys listening out there, think about maybe the females in your life, right? If you're married and your spouse is a wife, think about not just what does your pension mean to you, but what can you do to make this pension last longer and at a higher dollar amount for your wife?
Yeah, and you touched on something that's really important here. And so because you have joint survivorship obligations under a pension system, you have to consider not only your circumstances, but your spouse's circumstances. So if you take an annuity and provide 75% of the benefit in case the annuitant dies, for example, that's a 25% reduction. And people forget that tax rates for individuals are very different than for couples. And so your spouse dies, you get jumped up in terms of tax brackets often, and you're going to have a reduced pension for the rest of your life because that income stream is not there. So think about your significant other or your spouse, depending upon your circumstances.
Yeah, and it's a situation where if there's two of you, one of those Social Security amounts is going to drop.
Yes,
there
that's right.
will be a decrease in guaranteed income when the first person dies. Why would you compound that and make it even worse on there? Why would you make that difference even more? If you have a chance where you don't really have too much of a chance to change that survivorship on Social Security, I could argue you could do a couple things, but really not compared to the pension. Like, you've got a huge choice of what your survivorship is going to look like on there. And it's interesting, a lot of the guys, there's two guys here talking in the room. For some reason, it seems like the guys get to 60 or 65 and they start looking at that pension number and they're thinking, I need that extra $100 every month. And yet, let's think about the $1,000 every month your wife might be losing. I'm sure you can live off the $100 less, but that decrease of maybe 500 or 1,000, whatever the number is in the pension, because of that survivorship option you took, especially when you have Social Security dropping as well, that's not so easy to make up.
Right. Very difficult. And frankly, even as an advisor, I did some modeling with regard to Social Security for my own personal circumstances, and this includes income for my spouse. And it's very difficult for the average person to try to figure this out, because you go to the simplistic assumptions, and they generally aren't going to give you the best kind of answers. So having someone who has access to software in terms of modeling cash flows, what happens when the one of the two individuals dies, and so on, is very important. So don't just make assumptions without checking the math.
Yeah, checking the math's important. And so many people retire one time in their life, and yet someone like myself, someone like Dennis, we've helped hundreds of people retire. We've seen how it's worked out. We've gone through and filled out the paperwork and helped people make these decisions before. Don't run into this blind. And I'm just going to continue on with this idea of still 55 versus 57, because I think it's just such a huge key thing. So many teachers especially say, I'm retired at 55 because I can. I think so many people look at this last piece of their benefit statement, the annual statement of benefits, and see they put on 55, they put on 65. No way am I working till 65, so I must retire at 55, right? You kind of forget there's 10 steps in between 55 to 65.
Yeah.
And you can model it. I've got, of course, I'm a spreadsheet kind of guy.
Yeah.
I've got it on here. And what's interesting about this idea of, yes, your normal retirement age is 65 in this system. Yes, they discount it at 5% roughly per year. But what's so interesting about it, I've got the chart I've thrown in there. What's so interesting about it is it's not exactly even. Like you're taking money early between 65 and 64 is not that big of a deal compared to once you hit 57. So I looked here, and when you're 65 and kind of taking it earlier down to age 58 or so, I see where you lose like 1% from your pension, or 2% from your pension, or 3%, maybe even 4. 1 year I saw 4% in one of the options.
Yeah, it's 4.8 between 55 and 57, for example.
Yeah, and that's it's 4. It's much higher. Like they take away a lot more when you take it between 57 down to 56, 56 down to 55 than they do if you are taking it early after age 57.
Right.
It's not just a smooth like 5%. It's a smaller amount if you're taking it earlier between 65 and 57. It's a much larger amount between 57 and 55. They discount it a lot more than kind of they should in a way.
Right. And the other thing that people forget about retiring early is all of the other benefits that go with employment. So your health insurance, where are you going to get that health insurance if you're 55 or 56, and for how long? Mm-hmm. Even when you get to Medicare, you have substantial costs, 20% of your healthcare costs in general, that have to be met by you. And so there you're looking at, over a lifetime from any point on, particularly 65, of close to $150,000 per person. Mm-hmm. So you start out at 55, you give up the employer's health care for, let's say, 10 years. You give up their contributions to the retirement system. You give up inflation adjustments. So there are a lot of negatives in terms of retiring early. Been a great planner and socked money away and inherited the family farm, then good for you. You've got options that most people don't have. But remember, you only get one chance to figure out how to retire, and we don't want you back working at McDonald's.
It's Jeremy Keil here, and I know you're listening to the Retirement Reveal podcast because you want to learn more about making great retirement decisions. I've created a free video course for you to do just that. Head over to 5stepretirementplan.com and sign up to receive this video training right in your email inbox. We broke down our 5-step retirement plan into bite-sized videos so you can get started on the retirement, investment, and tax planning you need to create a consistent retirement income. Go to 5stepretirementplan.com, use the number or spell it out. You'll get there either way. 5stepretirementplan.com. Thanks for listening, and now for the rest of the show. We usually don't like to say the words never or always, but I'm going to think through here. You gave a great example. What if somebody makes about $60,000 a year? What if they've been in the system for 25 years and they retire at 55 versus retiring 2 years later at 57? And your example included, hey, you've got a little bit of extra inflation, so you're in your salary, and so your benefit amount is based on that. You've got a couple years extra credit, so you get more credit on there. And it's not, it's a couple years more. A couple years more, if you have 27 years in versus 25 years in, that means you have 8% more than you did 2 years ago, right? 27 into 25. It's a much, it's a bigger increase than you would really think. And then your payout rates, kind of how much they give you, is much greater. They might give you like 90% of what you're promised instead of 77% of what you're promised. Your number, I think it was, remind me of that, was basically your pension's about 25%. It could be the example, about 25% higher.
Yes, that's right. And so if you don't have the number of years of service in, that's a subtraction. So 25 versus the 30 years. And then the age factor, because if I have to provide you with a pension from 57 till you die versus 55 till you die, I have to put more money away if I'm the retirement system. And so both of those factors compound themselves.
Yeah, something I like to say is do the math. And now here's a bit of math that we were talking about in our call together earlier. I said, when talking about this specific example, I said, I would not be surprised if the value of your pension grows more from the value of the pension than what they're even paying you. And so I did the math. I looked it up. And yes, if you're a 55-year-old, I did the female example. You're a 55-year-old female, you're making $60,000 a year, you got 25 years in Wisconsin retirement system. I said, what's that extra increase worth? And waiting 2 years, it's almost as if they're going to pay you about $135,000 or more. But that's the extra amount. That's the extra value of that pension comes in.
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Yeah. So it's like every time you get that paycheck, and yes, you might want to retire at 55, but think of it like every time you get a paycheck, you're almost getting, you're basically getting an added paycheck that's even more, because that's how much is going into increasing your pension for your whole lifetime.
Yes, well said.
Yeah, it's interesting. Good. Well, we want to get towards wrapping some things up, but I can't do that without talking about really quick 2 kind of key points to think of. Some things that you are bits of extra benefits when it comes to the Wisconsin retirement system. And again, this is a vast system, takes years of study, and you want to make sure you're going through the math with a consultant like Dennis. But here's an interesting thing is that so many people I talk to, they've got a 403B. They're wise enough to start saving extra into their 403B. And yet, here's some interesting things. You could add extra money into your Wisconsin retirement system. Dennis worked with a place called WEAC, and there's the WEA TSA, Tax Sheltered Annuity, and there's a Wisconsin Deferred Comp. There's 3 places where you could add money to. And you had mentioned earlier how incredibly cheap the fees are, if you want to call them that, inside the Wisconsin retirement system are compared to doing it through another place. And also, too, just the experience and the returns that have been happening over the long run from the Wisconsin retirement system. I cannot imagine why someone would want to do a 403B where you've got a higher fee and you're paying a commission to a sales agent compared to some of these different options that just seem to me to be better. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So to maximize any amount of money that you want to annuitize later on, low fees are important, and more important than that is to start savings. And so Wisconsin Deferred Compensation Plan, for example, as well as the WATSA, 2 that I recommend highly, both have low-cost, fiduciarily obligated oversight, and so and they do it, on a shoestring compared to what some advisors are going to charge here. So the other advantage to the Wisconsin retirement system is that you can have the retirement system manage your money by contributing and additional amounts out of your paycheck. So many of you think about IRAs as a savings device. So 403Bs are another name for tax-sheltered annuities. And the Wisconsin retirement system essentially allows you to provide additional salary reduction, and then they will manage it for you basically for nothing. So it's it's an excellent value.
Right. And if you're someone that's interested in investing for the longer term, you put the money into the Wisconsin retirement system by doing these after tax. This is kind of our final point. Just a little extra trick or a tool, probably more of a tool, I suppose, than a trick. But use this tool if you can and you want to save extras. You can put the money in, have it come out of your paycheck, which is a lot easier than maybe contributing directly to a Roth IRA or traditional IRA. A lot cheaper than using a financial advisor. And earlier we mentioned how this idea of when you take what's called the accelerated benefit, they take away some of your money in the future to give it to you the next couple of years. One reason why that's a poor choice is because they're kind of taking away your money at 5%. Well, why not make use of this 5% that's built into there? They can pay you out 5%. You get to where maybe you do retire at 57 and you know that you're not taking your Social Security till 62 or 65 or 67, and you're understanding, I get this guaranteed amount coming in from the pension. Later on, I'll have a guaranteed amount coming in from Social Security. How do I bridge that gap? Well, right now, interest rates are definitely not 5%. I'm looking here at Wisconsin Deferred Comp, the WIA Trust, and you can get 1.5%, 2.5%, roughly around there. And yet you can put the money into the Wisconsin retirement system and let them pay you out for the next 5 years or 10 years at 5%. That's knowing the system and knowing the tools that are available to you. It seems like when 5% is a rate that is above what it kind of should be, because that's just what's built into the system, don't let them take it away from you at 5%. Maybe make use of it at 5% and explore this idea of putting after-tax contributions in and then letting them pay it out to you at a rate that's calculated at 5%.
Right. And of course, it's professionally managed, and you don't get what we call whipsawed when you start to see the S&P 500 go down 11-12% or worse if you're in higher growth kind of stocks. It's just been decimated. And this week is a perfect example of how a professional manager is going to look at that. So often they'll look and say, well, some stocks are on sale. It's time for us to buy. And they're going to buy them from retail people who get scared and move money at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm. You got it. Well, awesome, Dennis. Thanks for coming on. I knew as soon as you start speaking at this presentation, I said, I got to get this guy on the show. He's full of educational abilities on this Wisconsin retirement system. We run into so many people that are part of the system because, hey, that's just a lot of it's probably the biggest employer, you add it all up. Yes. In Wisconsin, it's got to be on there. So many people are having questions on this. We want everyone to maximize as best they can whatever tools they have available in your Wisconsin retirement system or any pension you have or your Social Security. These are things you ought to be looking at every single time when you're getting ready for retirement. So Dennis, I met you through a presentation. I know you do some personal consultations.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about how you get connected with people.
Well, if people have questions about the Wisconsin retirement system or want a second opinion, probably the easiest way is just to email me at abcdge1@gmail.com. So that's my email address. And I do some consultings for individuals about readiness. It's primarily financial education, but I find that most people really need this. I do seminars for school groups. Recently did one for Wisconsin's Region 7 here in the Milwaukee area for about 70 individuals. So I'm available to do presentations on general financial advice as well as specifics about the Wisconsin retirement system.
Yeah, and most people that are listening and are interested in Wisconsin retirement system are teachers, so they probably appreciate the education approach. You're not financial advisors. You're not trying to sell anybody anything.
Got nothing to sell you.
You got it. Just trying to offer some great education, and you've certainly done that. You've given us a great education on the Wisconsin retirement system, so thank you, Dennis, for coming on.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, good. And thank you, too, for listening to the Retirement Revealed podcast. We believe if you know more about your money, you will feel better about your money, and you will make better money decisions.
Thank you for listening to the Retirement Revealed podcast. Click on the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit retirement-revealed.com to learn more. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Keil Financial Partners. Keil Financial Partners does not provide legal, accounting, or tax advice. Consult your attorney or tax professional. Representatives have general knowledge of the Social Security tenets. For complete details on your situation, contact the Social Security Administration. Keil Financial Partners is a part of the Thrivent Advisor Network, a registered investment advisor. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.